He played on the biggest stages in European football. Champions League nights. Packed stadiums. Millions watching. A Dutch international with 50 caps. A winger who had graced the jerseys of Ajax, Sevilla, and Spartak Moscow. A player once valued at €20 million, coveted by Premier League giants Liverpool and Arsenal. But off the pitch, another story was being built in silence. A story no one could have imagined. And it would transform an elite footballer into a name linked to international criminal investigations involving more than a ton of cocaine. This is the story of Quincy Promes. And it is the story of a fall unlike any modern football has seen. Quincy Promes was not just another player. Born in Amsterdam on January 4, 1992, he rose through the famous Ajax Youth Academy before being let go at 16 for what the club called bad behavior. But he rebuilt himself. At 20 at Go Ahead Eagles, and then, in 2014, at Spartak Moscow, where he became a star. By 2017, he was the Russian Premier League's Player of the Year. By 2018, he was moving to Sevilla for €15.7 million. He had proven his level. He had played at the highest level. He was recognized. But while his career seemed stable, problems off the pitch began to surface. At first, they seemed like just rumors. Isolated incidents. Nothing that really threatened his career. Until everything started to escalate. And this time, there was no way to ignore it. Investigations began. His name started appearing where it should never be. Not in lineups, not in statistics, but in police reports, in accusations, in connections to a scheme much bigger than anything related to football. The case involved international drug trafficking, illegal movements, a network that went far beyond a single player. In January 2020, customs officials at the port of Antwerp seized a massive shipment of cocaine, 1,370 kilograms, hidden in containers of sea salt originating from Brazil. 2 batches, 650 kilos and 713 kilos. The smugglers managed to move the first shipment to a warehouse, but authorities intercepted the second. What investigators uncovered was staggering. Encrypted phones, eavesdropping equipment placed in suspects' cars, intercepted chat messages that laid out the entire operation in detail. And at the center of it all, the name Quincy Promes. The Dutch Public Prosecution Service alleged that Promes had directly invested €200,000 in the trade, that he normalizes and almost romanticizes the cocaine trade. And the question began to grow. How did an athlete of this level end up here? Meanwhile, he was still taking the field, as if nothing was happening. But everything was already changing. Before the drug charges came something else. In July 2020, at a family gathering in Abcud, a party turned into a crime scene. Promes got into an argument with a distant relative over a stolen necklace. The argument escalated. And then, Promes pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed the man in the knee. For years, the victim was described in media reports simply as his cousin. But his lawyers later clarified it was a distant relative. Promes did not come forward. According to his lawyers, enormous fear and anger prevented him from doing so. He had lost faith in the justice system. In 2023, the verdict came, 18 months in prison for aggravated assault. But Promes wasn't there. He had left Ajax in 2021, returning to Spartak Moscow. And Russia has no extradition treaty with the Netherlands. He continued playing, continued scoring goals, continued living as if nothing had changed. But the worst was yet to come. In February 2024, the Amsterdam court delivered its verdict. Quincy Promes was sentenced to 6 years in prison for his involvement in smuggling 1,360 kilograms of cocaine through the port of Antwerp in 2020. The court found that he was directly involved in the operation. The evidence included eyewitness accounts and intercepted phone calls. Many chat messages made it clear that both suspects were involved in bringing in, removing, and further transporting and selling these 2 consignments, prosecutors stated. His lawyers argued that the prosecution didn't have enough evidence, that the messages were never verified as actually being sent by Promes, that the case was built on assumptions. The court disagreed, and what was once suspicion became reality. The name Quincy Promes was no longer associated just with football. Now, he carried something much bigger, much heavier, and impossible to ignore. But here's where the story becomes even stranger. Despite the conviction, Promes was still free, playing football, living openly, earning a salary. How? Because the conviction was handed down in absentia, and Promes was in Russia, where the Netherlands could not reach him. In 2024, he moved to Dubai, signing with Dubai United in the UAE's second division. In 20 appearances, he scored 19 goals. He was living openly, playing matches, giving interviews. "I'm not going to lie that I miss the Netherlands very much and would like to come back," he told RTL Boulevard from Dubai. He claimed he wasn't on the run. "People have also often said that I am on the run, but I have been trying to get in touch with the Justice Department for some time to solve it," he said. He wanted to fly back and forth to the Netherlands when called up, to continue his career, to answer for himself. But the Dutch authorities had other plans. In 2024, Promes was also arrested in Dubai for leaving the scene of a traffic accident. He was not allowed to leave the country. The net was closing. On June 12, 2025, the end came. Promes was arrested at his home in Dubai following a formal extradition request by Dutch authorities. He was taken to a temporary detention center. Then, on June 19, 2025, he was put on a chartered plane and flown back to the Netherlands. The flight cost Dutch taxpayers approximately €86,000. But officials deemed it necessary due to safety risks of putting him on a public flight. Upon arrival, he was immediately transferred to a detention facility to begin serving his sentence. Combined, the two convictions, 6 years for drug trafficking and 18 months for assault, total 7.5 years in prison. The earliest possible date for his release is 2030, depending on parole eligibility and the outcome of any legal appeals. A footballer who once graced the Champions League was now in a Dutch prison cell. To understand this story, you have to understand that this wasn't just about one player making a mistake. Promes was embedded in a world far from the football pitch. His social circle included figures from Amsterdam's criminal underworld. He had ties to rapper Joeke, whose crew is associated with gun crime and cocaine trafficking. He had connections to other figures linked to organized crime. Prosecutors described him as someone who normalizes and almost romanticizes the cocaine trade. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a parallel life, one that eventually consumed everything he had built. In May 2023, before the drug conviction, he was already being charged over his alleged involvement in the cocaine smuggling. In 2024, the conviction came. In 2025, he was finally behind bars. The numbers tell a story of what was lost. 50 caps for the Netherlands national team. 7 international goals. In club football, Russian Premier League champion with Spartak Moscow in 2017. Russian Cup winner in 2022. Dutch Super Cup winner with Ajax in 2020. 135 games and 66 goals across 2 spells at Spartak. A career that could have ended with a statue. Instead, it ended in handcuffs. And here's what makes the story so difficult to understand. Because we're talking about a player who was at the top, who played at the highest level, who had a career, money, recognition. And yet, he ended up involved in something that could destroy everything. It wasn't lack of talent. It wasn't lack of opportunity. It was something different, something off the pitch. Football has seen many falls, injuries, loss of form, pressure. But some stories are different, because it's not the game that brings down the player. It's the choices. Quincy Promes had every advantage. The talent, the platform, the financial security, the support system of elite clubs like Ajax, Sevilla, and the Dutch national team. And yet, he chose to invest in cocaine trafficking. He chose to stab a family member over a stolen necklace. He chose to live a double life, believing his football fame would protect him. It didn't. In June 2025, the Dutch Public Prosecution Service confirmed his extradition. The 33-year-old former star, once valued at €20 million, was now a convicted criminal beginning a 7.5-year sentence. His lawyer continues to file appeals. He maintains his innocence in the drug case. But for now, he remains in pretrial detention, with the next hearing scheduled for late 2026. What makes the Promes case so haunting is the parallel universe it reveals. For years, while he was being investigated for drug trafficking, he was also scoring goals in the Champions League. While prosecutors were building a case about 1.3 tons of cocaine, he was being celebrated by fans. While encrypted phones were being intercepted and witnesses were testifying, he was wearing the captain's armband. The disconnect is jarring, but it's also a reminder that football, for all its glamour, exists in the real world. And the real world has consequences. In 2021, the Dutch national team stopped calling him up after the first accusations surfaced. But by then, the damage was already done. Quincy Promes is no longer a footballer. He is an inmate. The man who once lit up stadiums in Moscow, Seville, and Amsterdam now spends his days in a Dutch detention center. The earliest he could be released is 2030, by which time he will be 38 years old. His football career is over. His legacy, whatever it might have been, is now defined not by goals or trophies, but by the crimes he committed off the pitch. And the story carries a warning. Because the greatest adversary of a talent sometimes isn't on the field. It's the choices made when no one is watching. Football has seen prodigies rise and fall, but the fall of Quincy Promes is different. Not because of what he did on the pitch, but because of what he did when he left it. And it proves something uncomfortable. Sometimes the biggest threat to a footballer's career is themselves. If you enjoy deep football analysis that goes beyond the highlights and looks at the real stories behind the game, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next deep dive. And now, the question for the comments. Do you think football clubs do enough to protect players from the influences that led to Quincy Promes' downfall? Or is it ultimately the player's responsibility to make the right choices? I'll read you in the comments. Because football isn't just about what happens on the pitch. It's about everything else. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.